Egger's perspective. What do you mean? Admiral, what is he right about? I ask. I felt weary. My thoughts were whirling, my emotions unstable, I felt as if I could burst at any given time. The priest is right about our galaxy. We had suspected it was on the other side of the void, Admiral Tarvik answered. And? I ask. Gripping my rifle even harder. We are not here to conquer, I assure you. We just want to go home. But the part about the galaxy being dead, he is correct. 600 solar cycles ago, during the great exploration of the universe, we discovered your so-called council. Want to guess how? Admiral Tarvik started to explain. He got up from his seat and slowly walked towards the other side of the table, with both his hands behind him. Ark ship Noah, carrying around 5 million people, the very first colony vessel to leave our system, bound for a planet we named Lignius. Lignius was a world of trees, their colors vibrant and plentiful, so was the wildlife. By now we were still confined to our system. The expedition never made it into the planet, it disappeared off the map. No one knows what happened to it, and it would take years for probes to get to its last location. Still we sent them. 5 years later it came back bearing information leaving humanity in shock. Noah was in pieces. Question began flooding in. Asteroids? The Ark had weapons for it, unlikely but possible, solar flares. Possible, but that would leave the ship intact. Pirates? Sure, but they would have left it intact, plundered what's inside or dragged and scrapped the ship, if so then it would not be where it was. Admiral Tarvik continued. 2 years later, we found them. A council of unified galaxies, united galactic species they called themselves. We were overjoyed when they presented themselves to us, our people were eager to learn from them. We tried to contact them, presented them with smiles and flattery. They simply replied with one sentence. People of Earth, you are a virus to the galaxy, and we the Council of Species have decided to exterminate you for the good of the galaxy, the alien said, continued Admiral Tarvik. He now moved towards me slowly, his step like thunder, heavy and hard. Admiral Tarvik's face was full of sorrow, he was hurt. We were dumbfounded. The very first alien species we have spent millennia to find, declared war on us. The aliens started by destroying our mining colonies on the belt. Most of those colonies were home to thousands of people. We sent our fleet at them, my ancestors was captain of one, he died, they all did. Their technology was far advanced than ours, all of our fleet were left in ruin or routed. They torched every single colony of ours, none were left standing, its populace massacred. Year by year we were losing ground, year by year they were coming closer and closer to their goal, we were filled with despair, our future depends on the battles ahead. Admiral Tarvik slowly walked around the room still talking. Fortunately humanity is not the type to give up easily. We were determined to push back the enemy, reclaim our worlds, and give them a taste of their own medicine. Our weapons were obsolete against their shields, but, humanity is intelligent, we noticed that their shields were rather large, there were pockets of empty space between the shield and the ship. We created the Arrow-type destroyer, small, nimble, and stealthy, its purpose was to get in the enemy shields and kill it. They would be launched from larger vessels, the larger vessels would take all the attention until the destroyer was able to penetrate the shields of the enemy vessel. At first we were still skeptical, but it was better than nothing. The destroyer was packed full of weaponry, a miracle it could still move fast. On Jupiter it was tested, one of the major colonies was under attack, we warped in just in time. The battle was fierce. They destroyed many of our vessels and our guns failed to destroy their shields, we were losing, our morale was low and was on the brink of routing, that was until one of the enemy ships blew up, and behind it was one of the destroyers. The enemy was startled and retreated, it was humanity's first win. More and more we won, each battle we would get in their faces and blast them. They tried to counter it but we simply adjusted and improved our weapons until Arrow-type destroyers were no longer needed. Humanity was smart, Ruined enemy vessels were studied, their technology uncovered. New ships, new weapons, new tech and tactics. For long we won our system back. Upon reaching the outer edges of our system, we were unstoppable, no ships could penetrate our shields, our weapons lay waste to any that dared stand in our way. Humanity sought revenge, for the lives lost, for the blood spilled, and for the destruction of our homes. From our generals one sentence was said, lay waste to their homes, no quarter be given, all shall receive our vengeance, fight. Kill. Eradicate. Only humanity remains. Over a span of hundreds of years, we killed them all, the women, the children, all received our vengeance. After the extermination of thousands of species, humanity was left alone to ponder our mistake. We explored the galaxy to find friends. We failed. Humanity was saved by wrath and rage, but at the cost of millions of species dead. Now you know our story. Tell me, Edgar, do we scare you now? Admiral Tarvik asks as he sits back down on his chair. Do you see now, they are butchers, killers, demons. Just like how the holy books describe them. The priest remarks. I was torn. Humanity, the people I call friends, Tixon, they were monsters. I could not believe it, they were the people the church told us about. Demons from the lowest reaches of hell, the worst of the worst. If the people heard of this, they would freak out. But the church also displayed such actions. Waging wars, killing innocents, they did this under the pretense of God. Honestly, I don't know, was the answer I gave to Admiral Tarvik's question. You are butchers and killers, I saw your wrath and rage, outside lay the proof, but I know you are also empathetic, kind, helpful, Tixon's actions during his stay proves it. I do not believe you are demons. I continued. I see, I thank you for that, said Admiral Tarvik. Now priest, I am curious. Care to tell me more about these books, or shall I pry it out of you, said Admiral Tarvik threateningly. I do not know its contents, I only saw a few pages. The Sept library is where you'll find it, said the priest as he groaned in pain. Take him to the brig, make him tell us everything he knows, oversee to it firsthand. Admiral Tarvik nodded towards the man that was torturing the priest. A few of the men escorted the priest outside of the room. The priest was still writhing in pain, but none of the soldiers seemed to care. A few minutes later, only a handful of people stayed, me, Tixon, Tarvik included. Edgar, what can you tell me about the planets and systems beyond? Admiral Tarvik asks. Well, the theology operates on a sector-based system. This planet and 3 other systems belong to sector Lyard, meaning green or vegetation. This is the only planet inhabited on this star system, other star systems usually have 1 or 2. Most of the planets are designed for growing food for the whole sector. The central planet for the sector is Maven, a few systems jump away. I answer. I see, how many sectors are there exactly? Admiral Tarvik asks. 12 in total, with a few independent planets. All planets in a sector fall under the authority of its regent Grand Priest. I answer. And I assume each sector has its own capital? Admiral Tarvik asks. That would be correct. Though those planets always have a garrison around 3,000 ships, and depending on the planet's importance, it would also possess incredible anti-ship weapons, planet-wide shielding, and local militia. I explained. The look of the human confused me, they were showing their teeth, smiling they called it. Tixon explained that it was their way of showing happiness. Do they not realize that the planet had a significant amount of ships, weapons, and manpower to repel an attacking force 3 times their size? With their measly group of ships, they would be outnumbered 3 to 1. Any species would think twice of attacking a planet, more so a capital planet. If you plan to attack it, I would like to say that you will be outgunned, outnumbered, and they have the home advantage. An attack is impossible, I pleaded. I was no strategist, only a simple footman, but even I see that an attack would simply not work. But the human's answer shook me. Impossible, humanity doesn't know the word, said Admiral Tarvik proudly, looking straight at me. Planet Maven, central planet of Lyard Sector, aka Green Sector. The planet is ruled by Sumerka Lion Sereth, chosen Grand Priest by the Pope himself. 3 generations of Sereth lineage had ruled over the sector of Lyard, and they did with pride. Among all of the Grand Priest of the theology, Serethas are known as the most fanatic and most loyal out of all. They may not be swimming in riches, but they do in honor and battle prowess. It is said that once the enemy knew that they would be fighting against a Sereth army, they would immediately surrender, as they know there is no winning against them. Their army was strong. Among the countless battles and feuds they participated, Sereth armies never lost a battle. Zarvox Lion Sereth, second son of Sumerka Lion Sereth, was left to govern the planet of Maven in his stead. War commanded both his father and brother Vorlix to the front line. Sereths were of Zentari species. Their average height was about 5 feet, they were ant-like in appearance, chitin body act as natural body armor. They have 2 thin sets of arms. Most now use cybernetics, ditching their natural arms for a pair of metal arms ending in 3 digits with 2 sets of legs for swift movements. Zarvox was inferior in all aspects to his brother. He was mediocre in war planning, weak in combat, and did not possess the charm of a priest. In all aspects he was a failure, so he focused on something he was good at, governing. Thus when war came he was put in charge while his father and brother fought. Their goodbyes were bitter. His brother was kind to him, something his father lacked. When they were leaving, he wished them luck in battle, only his brother responded with his father not saying a word. Planet Maven 0500, 832nd year, 3rd day of the month of Sinoka. The light of the sun was still hidden beyond the horizon as Zarvox awakened from his slumber. His bed was soft, taunting him to sleep. Still Zarvox had his duties ahead of him, the 3-hour meeting yesterday still fresh from his mind, hoping it never happens again. He sat up and stood on his bedside and started to stretch, ridding himself of the urge to sleep. As he was finished with his stretching, 3 female Zentari opened and entered the chamber, holding warm buckets of water and towels. One of the females opened the door to the balcony and a cold wind rushed through. Zarvox, wearing a white sleepwear, shuddered in the cold wind. That was when he noticed something, not the glow of the sun peeking over the horizon, it was something else. Dark smog tailing something falling. One more parted the clouds, this one was enveloped in fire and smoke. Zarvox, now outside his balcony, no longer felt the cold winds nor admired the morning sun, he looked up only to see clouds blocking his view. He gulped, his mandibles clittering in fear and anxiousness. As if the gods knew what he was thinking, the clouds parted and he could see the darkness beyond lit in flames of war. His fleet was fighting unknown assailants, the void flashed in laser and plasma cannons. As he looked on, one of his fleet's larger battleships exploded in a fiery mess, debris scattering, practically breaking the ship in 2. He turned around and in a calm manner he says, "Prepare for battle." The lights of the room were flickering, comms only spewed static, the screen showed cameras monitoring places of the city. The people were panicking, looking at the skies and seeing the battle in the void. The doors hissed and opened and came in Zarvox, sporting combat gear like that of an old medieval armor, plated sections of metal attached to his body for extra protection, on his side holding a small plasma weapon and on the other an officer's sword in its scabbard. All stood at attention as the Zarvox entered, bowing then retreating back to work. "Give me an update, why was I not informed of the battle?" Zarvox asks calmly, his mandibles clittering. "My lord, we did not receive any word from the fleet, we only just noticed now," one of the workers answer. "I need eyes, put them up," Zarvox commanded. "Yes, my lord," the worker answered. The screen showed the current battle above the planet. They could see the carnage that was happening, but what worried Zarvox the most was the fact that they had not seen even one of the enemy ships destroyed. Laser attacks merely bounced against the shield of the enemy. Volley after volley his fleet tried to take down the enemy ship but all ended in failure as the enemy volleyed back and turned 5 ships into scrap metal. "Turn on the planet's shields," Zarvox commanded, his voice saddened. "But sir, the fleet," one of the workers says. "I know, but the planet must not fall," said Zarvox, his eyes closing and his head down. "But sir dash," the worker says. He gets interrupted as Zarvox looks towards him. "Shields now!" Zarvox shouted. The worker immediately went to push buttons. They waited for minutes expecting the blue shielding of the planet to turn on and protect them. "What is going on?" "Talk," asked Zarvox. "I don't know, sir, the shields should be up by now," the worker answered. The conversation was cut as one of the enemy battleships loomed over the planet's atmosphere, clouds parting in its gigantic size. "Gods! Forget the planetary shields, put up the city's shielding now!" Zarvox shouted. He looked toward another worker. "Tell the other city centers to do the same," Zarvox says. He turned towards another worker. "Tell the populace to move to the shelter. I want every single species capable of holding a weapon to be drafted," Zarvox commanded. As he finished talking he saw the battleship firing multiple projectiles from its underside, some of them going to the directions of other cities. 5 of them were coming towards them. 3 of the projectiles landed outside the walls of the city but 2 made it inside just in time before the city's shield enveloped the city. The screen switched through different cameras until they spotted one of the crashed projectiles in an open plaza. The floor of the plaza was heavily damaged due to the impact of the projectiles. Zarvox expected it to explode. By now most of the citizens of the third wall were already inside the bunker. The people left near the crash site were the unfortunate first wall denizens who were making their way to the bunkers. Zarvox ordered the forces near the area to converge and ascertain what exactly the projectile was. The projectile was surrounded immediately after the order. Roofs, roads, streets and alleys were manned, all looking at the unknown object in their midst. A lot of banging could be heard from inside, and every time it does the people surrounding it jolt in fear. There was a good 100 meters of open ground before reaching hab blocks and alleys. The banging continued through the few minutes it took to surround the unknown projectile. One of the officers ordered a new recruit to check out the projectile. The recruit hesitated but knew he could not refuse a direct order. Slowly he crept up, pointing his plasma weapon to the crashed projectile. He took a good look at the projectile in front of him, circling it. The projectile was octagonal in shape, pointed at the end, a myriad of light sources flashing red in color, unknown shape and symbols surrounded the face of the projectile. He tried to touch it but not even a second of trying the projectile door popped open, throwing a hunk of metal several feet in the air. The frightened recruit ran straight towards his commanding officer, tumbling and tripping himself. From the projectile came 5 entities, their skin made of metal hissing and clanking. They were taller than them, their eyes unyielding with a glow of blue. Hose and wiring seemed dangling in the cracks of their armor, a huge square pack at their back spewing fumes and gas. They were holding weapons with different shape and sizes. Some weapons had hose connecting to the pack behind them, their head covered in thick metal. They had a small slit in their helmets for vision and a hose located in their mouth area connected to a box seen in front of them, their armor decorated with various patterns that differ from one another except for one, a vicious animal biting what looks to be a lightning. Zarvox saw what was happening through the screen. He and his forces stood still for a good few seconds. The unknown entities scanned the area, their heads moving left and right. One of the entities threw something in the air. It blew up in a white light, blinding everyone in the vicinity. Zarvox instinctively covered his eyes. When he looked back he saw carnage and brutality. The entities charged forward in brutal fashion. Even before his forces could know what was going on, one of the entities got a hold of a soldier and tore him in two, splattering blood and guts towards the soldiers nearby. The disciplined soldiers, though disoriented, were not new to shock attacks, but never with this amount of savageness. 2 entities were left by the crash site firing their weapons. Projectiles would puncture through 2 or 3 soldiers, flesh burned and metal melted. What was astonishing was that not a single shot by the unknown entities missed. and the rate at which they could dispense ammunition rivaled rain itself. The battle continued. Zarvox's forces tried to keep the entities at bay through sheer fire. Their coordination was extraordinary, volley firing in a matter of seconds towards the entities, some of the fire bouncing right off. The volley fire was having an effect. One of the entities dropped to his knees, one of his two arms covering his face. It was short-lived as thousands of projectiles peppered their position, bringing down 10 of the soldiers. The soldiers took cover and waited for the right moment to pop up to shoot again. No moment would come as the gigantic entity jumped to the center of their formation. The soldiers switched to close combat. One of the soldiers approached, his weapons upside down to try to hit it with the butt of the rifle. The entity simply slapped the soldier against the wall and splattered the soldier into paste. The entity's armor ran red with heat where the soldiers focused their fire, its towering figure intimidating even the most hardened of them. Still they fought. One soldier jumped in the entity's back and fired shot after shot at its neck. Surprisingly, the entity groaned in pain. Zarvox, watching through the camera, heard the groan. So they do feel pain, he thought to himself. The entity grabbed the soldier behind him and simply threw him to the wall, painting it in red. The battle continued as Zarvox's soldiers tried to defeat the 5 unknown entities. 5, yes, there were 5 of them, Zarvox thought to himself. He counted the entities on the battlefield, for there were only 4 of them. Where is the other one, he thought. By now the battle in the plaza had already been going on for 30 minutes, hundreds of Zarvox's forces lay dead. Zarvox analyzed the battlefield. The entities pushed forward. They managed to push back the Zarvox's soldiers. Now the battle was taking place in the streets with small and narrow alleyways and streets. The soldiers could not mount a proper defense coupled with a monster in close combat. Only a fool would not see the inevitability of loss, but the entities were now largely separated. The ranged entities could no longer support the close combat ones. This could be an opportunity to take one down, that was what he thought. Zarvox's thought was interrupted as he sensed something lurking in the shadow of the room. It seemed like nobody noticed yet. He instinctively turned around, grabbed the hilt of his sword and drew his pistol, to the surprise of the people around him. There in the darkness he could see it, a singular red-eye, slender body, a long tail of fur located atop its head to its waist, its clothes dark as night. As it showed itself, it held a pair of dagger, one on each hand, some kind of pouch on its waist, and it spelled trouble. Time stood still as Zarvox stared at the entity, his weapon square at the entity's head. He only needed to push the trigger, but his instinct tells him otherwise, screaming that the entity before him is different from everything he has seen before. He glanced behind him. The workers stood at their post, their mandibles clacking in fear. The entity just stood there not doing anything. It was just waiting, eerily in silence. Zarvox studied the entity. He deduced that it was here for something, not for someone. If it were, he or the workers would have been dead before he noticed the entity. The entity was not after his life nor the lives of the workers, which means it must be after the shielding. Zarvox glanced over the worker on the shielding power. It was a mistake. The entity picked up on Zarvox's movement and also looked upon the worker. Zarvox noticed. He immediately pulled the trigger, his weapon discharging a bright blue projectile. There was around 50 meters between him and the entity. The blue projectile illuminated the room. It would take less than a second before the projectile would hit the entity. The entity bent its body, reeling its entire body backwards, dodging the blue projectile in mere inches. Its dexterity and flexibility astonished Zarvox. No species in the universe could come close to doing what the entity did. The amount of concentration just for balance must have been astonishing. The entity stood back up. Zarvox fired another shot. The shot hit the entity's center mass. The projectile was comparable to lava, melting and penetrating most forms of armor. Zarvox was dumbfounded as the entity simply walked forward without any visible damage on it. Zarvox was about to fire, when something hit his cyborg arm, rendering it immobile. It was a small blade that once was in the hand of the entity, now stuck in his robotic arm, rendering movement impossible. The entity was fast approaching. The room rumbled with each step. Zarvox tried to fix his cyborg arm. Unable to fix his arm, he drew his blade with his other arm. only half could be unsheathed before the entity pinned him to the ground with a knife pointed at his neck. Zarvox saw his life flash before him as he thought it was his end. A shriek distracted the entity. It looked up to where the sound came from. Zarvox took this opportunity to push the entity, using every ounce of strength to do so. He was successful. As Zarvox stood back up, the worst just happened. The entity in its arms held the operator for the shields. The operator, clearly scared, begged Zarvox or anyone to save him. Shield, a voice echoed in the room. It was new, unfamiliar. Shield. Down, it says again, in a terrible accent, barely understandable. At first Zarvox wondered who was speaking, then it hit him as another word came out from the entity. Shields. Down. Now. It shocked everyone in the room. The silence was deafening, all of them were in a trance staring at the entity. You speak? Zarvox asked the entity. Shields. Down. Now, the entity repeated. Before Zarvox could speak another word the ground shook, the lights in the room swung violently and the room groaned threatening to swallow them all. A quake, he thought. The entity lost balance in the sudden quake, losing its grip on the shield operator who took the opportunity to push the entity and ran. As the quake stopped and the entity regained its balance, Zarvox jumped at the entity. A fierce struggle ensued. Zarvox tried to pin the entity to the ground, but the entity was stronger than anticipated. The entity, having the upper hand, held Zarvox by the arm and slammed him into the wall like a ragdoll. The wall cracked and broke, revealing the city outside. Zarvox was again pinned to the ground, his chitin cracked, broken or missing in some places, his breath ragged, blood coming from multiple injuries, his eyes in a haze, unable to clearly see. The entity was over him, bending a knee, and once again raised his weapon to deliver a killing blow like the one before, but this time the entity would make sure it would land. Before the entity could kill Zarvox, something distracted it. It looked over the city in chaos. Plasma and laser fire dotted the streets, buildings in ruin or on fire, streets and walls painted with the remains of Zarvox's soldiers. The entity stood up and stared at the view. Zarvox by this time was starting to get his bearings and stared at the entity, blood dripping from his countless wounds. The entity looked at him, its dark reflective helm covering its face, seemingly staring right into Zarvox's soul, his consciousness fading into black. Human reserve vessel, resilient, bridge. Countless people were panicking, computers flashing in the dark bridge ringing data, ship hands were walking at a fast pace. At the center of them all stood the Resilience captain staring at the screen in front of her. Report. What the fuck happened to my squads? Shouted the captain. Ma'am, readings are still unclear, but teams 1 through 3 are responsive. Locator shows that they are at the edge of the city. Team 4 and 5 are still MIA, answered one shipman. Any answers from the ship floor? The captain asks. Yes ma'am, I've just received a report. A malfunction was detected at the last minute. The ship floor crew tried to stop launch but was unsuccessful. The shipman paused. It's teams 4 and 5 pods ma'am. The ship floor reports that those were the pods that malfunctioned. Engineers on the floor think that it was an AI problem. They say the destinations of the pods are the city center and a plaza. The shipman continued. Shit, tell 1 through 3 to continue setting up those markers. Tell the assault group to prepare. What do we know about their shielding? The captain asks. Ma'am, if initial reports are true then, USS Hammer should have sufficient firepower to overload the shield, the shipman responded. The captain looked towards the comms officer. Connect me with the USS Hammer, tell them it's urgent, says the captain. Immediately the comms officer called the USS Hammer. The captain looked towards the screen again. ETA on those markers, says the captain. 1 minute ma'am, answers the shipman. Report on other groups, asks the captain. Multiple ground troops report mission success, and are waiting for new assignments. Multiple objectives are now under our control. The shipman answers. Ma'am, USS Hammer is on the line, says the comm officer. Put him through, says the captain. The screen flickered for a moment, the screen stabilized, revealing an old man, had pure white hair, multiple medals on his blue and gold uniform, and an insignia revealing the rank of a fellow captain. Miss Luna Wolf, what a surprise, Captain Torin says enthusiastically. Captain Torin, a pleasure. I will not waste time, we ask for assistance. We ran into quite a bit of trouble, planning is only good on paper, not so much when in motion. Captain Luna explains. I see, what do you need from us, asks Captain Torin. We need the hammer's firepower to break a city shield. My men are stuck inside the city with no way out as long as those shields stand. Captain Luna explains. Okay Captain, we'll help, ETA 5 minutes. Out, said Captain Torin as the screen turned back to showing data sheets. Ma'am, multiple ground troops request additional reinforcements. One shipman say. Are there beacons online? Asks Captain Luna. Confirmed, bright and green, answers the shipman. Send in the reserves, Captain Luna says. Unknown front. Vorlon. We need more men, I don't know what those iron invaders are doing but it can't be any good. Where are my reserves? Zatari shouted in his oral communication device. A crackle went before an answer. The crackle subsided, then a voice distorted by static barely audible said, I have no more reinforcements to give you, we had committed all of our reserves to other fronts. I am sorry but there is nothing we can do. You have your orders, fulfill them with what you have, may the gods bless you. Vorlon you bastard, fuck, curses Zatari. He looks over to his right, another one of his men fell to the enemies. He was furious, on the streets lay the bodies of his brave men. The rest were taking cover behind anything they could, carts left by residents, alleyways, and even the bodies of their dead firing back towards the enemy on the stairway of their great temple. It was an embarrassment to lose the temple, every attempt at retaking only ended in failure. Before they had almost 1,000 soldiers, now they only numbered lower than 100. Zatari peeked half his head to see what was going on, but upon doing so his head almost flew as a laser fire scraped the edge of his face. He recalled 5 beings that emerged from that thing that dropped into their marketplace, laying a blanket of rounds against his forces, killing almost 100 in an instant, all holding unknown and strange ranged weapons. Zatari, what do we do? We can't keep doing this. We should fall back and regroup and attack again, one of the soldiers says to Zatari. We are all that's left, Vorlon said no to reinforcements, apparently he ran out, says Zatari. Gods help us, one of the soldier remarks. How many of us are left? Asks Zatari. 30 men at least here, rest are scattered, answer one subordinate. I beg of you sir, let us regroup and plan another attack, ask another subordinate. The longer we leave them alone the more entrenched they may become, we don't want to give them a foothold. Establish contact with the others and push the invader back. Wait for the signal flare, blind them with smoke and overwhelm them with numbers. Commanded Zatari. Yes sir, answered the soldier. But before the soldier could move to relay the command, a bright light erupted inside of the temple rivaling that of the local sun. Zatari instinctively shielded his eyes for the light was blinding. As the light dissipated Zatara looked towards the temple where the enemy was, his face was full of shock and horror as 2 more iron men came from inside the temple as well as a lot of soldiers marching in unison, head to feet in gray-colored armor and a helmet with a dark face cover. Zatari was stunned for a few moments as more and more of the enemy marched down the stairs from the temple. Zatari was a veteran of many battles, he was a hero to his soldiers, a great commander, courageous leader, a good father, a true friend, an honest citizen, faithful follower, and now a coward. Zatari screamed and ran for his life leaving his faithful soldiers to their demise. He ran as fast as he could as far as his legs could take him, his mind racing, full of fear and overwhelming terror but one thought came above all, we have lost.